Hi, David. Thanks for doing this interview with me.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
Likewise, you're one of our newest elders. We convinced you to move from being a deacon to being an elder, and you gamely went with us, which was very kind of you.
Or foolhardy.
Or foolhardy, right? They're not mutually exclusive, so it can be both. Okay, what's your full name, and is there a story behind your name that's worth telling?
Well, I was born, my parents gave me the name David Duncan Steege. And, Duncan is kind of unusual and you'd think there'd be an interesting story. My parents were just a little goofy. They thought that worked well with the last name. The big thing for my family is Steege is kind of a tough one to pair. You don't want like Steve Steege or something. So
Yeah.
my father vetoed my mother's choice, which was Derek.
Uh-huh.
He said people do misspell that. So he was an elementary school teacher and principal, and he said their second choice was David. So I went with David. So I was David Duncan Steege
Nice.
for a long time. Yep.
And where did you grow up?
Palo Alto, California, so the San Francisco Bay Area,
Nice.
where the weather's always like in the 70s.
Mhm.
It was a pretty good place to grow up. It was pretty
Yeah.
nice.
And now you're in Wisconsin, so
And I'm in Wisconsin. So, right. So I spent the first 18 years of my life. The biggest move I had was when my sister moved out of her room to go to college and I moved into her room. That was it for moves. And then moving to North Carolina to go to um, graduate school, and then to Wisconsin for my first and only, full-time job for,
wow,
yeah.
nice. Well, that's amazing, minus the fact that you started in the Bay Area and you've ended in Wisconsin, which feels like maybe not upward movement in the weather world.
Well, I still have family there, so I go visit. That's when I go visit family, that's where it is.
Yeah. And where do you work? And what do you
So I
do?
work at I work at Carthage College. Maybe you can see in this video, there's like a
Mhm.
little scarf we were given this winter, a Carthage scarf. So yeah, I've worked there. This is my 30th year
Wow.
at Carthage, and more or less the 30th year at the church too. But I started as an full-time English professor, and I'm still an English professor, but I'm a full-time administrator here, working with the provost. So I do a lot of administrative things, and I work with parent concerns, student concerns, and our academic support services like a writing center, tutoring center, study abroad, and so on. So, and a lot to do with curriculum. So it's kind of it's a
Hmm.
nice varied job that's changed over the years a lot. So it's fun to keep doing it.
Nice. Um, what individuals have had the greatest influence on your faith life?
Hmm. Well, interestingly, thinking about that, it's like, my parents, but in an interesting way for me, in that I was absolutely forced to go to church, congregational church in Palo Alto, like you had to go, but
Mhm.
my parents never told me what to believe or, how to believe things. They just wanted me exposed to it. So
Mhm.
I went through rebellious phases and phases where I said I don't want to be part of this youth group because, whatever, and I would go to church with them instead and all kinds of things. So they really let me they kind of let alone what the faith was. And then it was really interesting because my dad, who was pretty he had strong beliefs, but he didn't ever try to impose them ever, really. And my mother, after he died, eventually in conversation said, well, she's really doesn't believe in God. She's an atheist. So it was an interesting, but she went to church and was on committees and did all those things. But it was really probably my dad
Yeah.
who's yeah, who came from a Methodist family, and we ended up going to, and my mother was from a Mormon family, and we ended up going to a liberal congregational church so I grew up in the 70s in a liberal church that was pretty open-minded,
Yeah.
which fit really well, and they let me find my own faith. So that was good. That was
Yeah.
really influential. And
Yeah.
certainly, I mean, I should say, Mary, uh, my ex-wife, was a pastor, and that was obviously really important in that
Sure.
I followed her around and eventually found my own identity in a
Mhm.
church. But initially it was really just following somebody else to church, including this one, and then realizing, oh, I need this and this is important to me.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
yeah,
When are you most aware of God's presence?
kind of two different ways. I realize that when a lot of times when I'm most aware, I also think it's when I'm most grateful. So
Mhm.
it's when I'm with people and there's a lot of kindness and generosity, and I just feel this incredible warmth, and it's like, thank you, God,
Mhm.
for these people, and for people being sometimes kind and generous when they could be not that, they're making
Yeah.
choices to do that. And that at work that's really great when I see that, when I work with faculty members who are giving grace to students,
Mhm.
and um, working on something together that feels like it's really positive. So that's one place where I feel really close to God. The other is when it's like in the mountains or in nature. So it's
Mhm.
those two, sort of like one's people and then one's sometimes no people,
Right.
where it's just the beauty and presence is really clear
Mhm.
when being in nature, especially up in the mountains, particularly in California, the Sierras.
Yeah.
Um, so those are the kind of the places I feel the closest.
Nice. What are some of your gifts or skills, or what do you like to do in your free time, if you have any?
Yeah, I definitely have free time, um, which is a good thing. Um, but I'm here a lot, long days at Carthage. But yeah, my skills, I think they're largely supporting skills, supporting others.
Mhm.
That's why I've been an associate dean and an associate provost, because I like to support others in their work. And so it's whether it's my boss or students or parents or staff members. It's like being part of an organization and working towards goals and helping others and supporting others to do their best.
Yeah.
Um, that's kind of seems like that's something I've done pretty well over the years. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah. And I love to read. I mean, I'm an English professor and sort of stereotypical, math phobic, but
Mhm.
love to read, very nerdy in that way, kind of geeky. But yeah, that's one of my greatest joys for sure, is reading.
Nice. And what's the best thing or the most important thing for you about being part of a church community?
Potlucks. Oh no, that's not what that shouldn't start with that, right? That shouldn't lead with potlucks. Let's see, the best thing. Well, the best thing really is what I'm sure a lot of people say, which is the community.
Mhm.
It's such an important community, but it's also a community where, oh my gosh, here are these other people who are um, they're thinking about higher things. They're thinking about things beyond just how do we make it through the day, or how do we get, make our money or do this. It's like, oh, there's shared purpose that's beyond just the ordinary. But I mean, it is about God, and it is about faith, and about community and making things better. And it's like that's just great to be part of something like that, that's focused on kind of the higher things, it seems like. So that's a great thing.
Nice. Okay, last question. It's a surprise question, so we can edit it out if it's terrible. But what's a great book that you've read recently? Mostly because I like to pick other people's brains.
Um, well, I know this is kind of a weird one, but I liked, and I can't, the author's name is escaping me, but it won a prize, a couple prizes. It's called Interior Chinatown,
Huh.
and it's kind of a weird one where it's about a guy who um, is a waiter at a restaurant, and where his family owns the restaurant and he's there, but it's also the set in Los Angeles for a lot of shows, particularly one show. and it's about kind of what it's like to be relegated to the typical Asian role. So the biggest role you can get in this show that films there is the kung fu guy, but
Mhm.
you could be the old Asian guy. It's about, it's certainly
Yeah.
about what it's like to be Asian, and that seems so relevant right
Yeah.
now, the problems that we've had. And this came out a little just this past year.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but I enjoyed it and thought it was both funny and touching, and certainly my experience from living in California
Yeah.
sort of like really resonated with that. So I liked Interior Chinatown. It's a good
Nice.
book.
I haven't heard of that one, so thanks. Well, thank you for doing this interview. I really appreciate it. And thanks for agreeing to switch and be on session with us and sign up for, another set of terms. But
Right,
uh,
right.
thank you
Well,
for
good.
all of your time.
Well, thank you too, Sarah. It's always a pleasure to, and I just want to say I really appreciate what you and Pastor Jenny are doing. It's been wonderful in really tough circumstances. You've actually made it something really deeply moving and important to have the services we have. So, and the things you've done in the community. So thanks.
Thanks. Thank you.